I never thought I'd be standing outside my own cabin, locked out by the very people I bought it for. But there I was, staring at the new deadbolt my parents had installed, listening to my mother's cold voice through the window. "We need our privacy. You can visit when invited." What they didn't know was that I had the sheriff's number on speed dial and a for sale sign in my trunk. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a software engineer for a tech startup in Denver, and until 3 months ago, I thought buying a family vacation cabin would finally give me the acceptance I'd been chasing my whole life. I was wrong. Let me take you back to where this all started, because understanding my family dynamics is crucial to understanding why this moment felt both devastating and inevitable. I'm the youngest of 3 kids in what most people would call a successful middle-class family. My brother David is 32, works in finance, and has always been the golden child. My sister Emma is 30, married with 2 kids, and she's always been the princess who could do no wrong. Then there's me, Sarah the afterthought, the one who existed to make everyone else's life easier. Growing up, I learned early that my role in the Martinez family was to be useful, not loved. While David got praised for his baseball trophies and Emma got celebrated for her beauty pageant wins, I got handed chore lists and told to help out more around the house. When David needed help with homework, I was pulled out of my own study time to tutor him. When Emma wanted to go to parties, I became the built-in babysitter so my parents could drive her around. The pattern was so consistent that I didn't even question it until I was 16 and got diagnosed with lymphoma. I'll never forget lying in that hospital bed, watching other families hover around their sick children while my parents were notably absent. When I asked where they were, the nurse gently explained that they'd gone to attend my uncle's wedding. Apparently, David was the best man, and Emma was a bridesmaid, and the family photos were too important to miss. I spent 3 days alone in that hospital room before they finally showed up, and even then my mother's first words weren't, "How are you feeling?" but "I hope you understand why we had to be at the wedding." David's responsibilities as best man were very important. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, I was still just a 16-year-old kid who desperately wanted her parents' love. But a small quiet voice in the back of my mind started keeping score. The voice got louder during my senior year of high school when I graduated as valedictorian. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, maintaining a 4. 0 GPA, while also managing the household responsibilities my parents had dumped on me. I thought surely this achievement would make them proud, would finally prove I was worth their attention. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon in May. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of proud families, searching for my parents' faces. They weren't there. David was getting married that same weekend, his second wedding actually, since he'd eloped 6 months earlier, but wanted a real ceremony for the family. My parents had decided that the wedding photos were more important than watching their youngest daughter give the valedictorian speech. I delivered that speech to a crowd of strangers while my own family celebrated my brother's redundant wedding 3 states away. That night, alone in my cap and gown, I made myself a promise. I would become so successful, so undeniably valuable, that they'd have no choice but to acknowledge me. College was my escape hatch. I threw myself into computer science, worked 3 part-time jobs to minimize student loans, and graduated summa cum laude with job offers from 5 different tech companies. I chose the startup because they offered equity, and I knew that if I could help build something valuable, I'd finally have the kind of success my family would respect. For 4 years after graduation, I worked 80-hour weeks, lived in a tiny studio apartment, and poured every ounce of my energy into making the company successful. When we got acquired by a major corporation last year, my equity payout was substantial enough to change my life completely. That's when I made what I thought was the perfect gesture. Instead of buying myself a house or taking a lavish vacation, I decided to purchase something for the family, a vacation cabin where we could finally create the loving memories I'd been craving my entire life. I spent weeks researching properties in Colorado, looking for something that would accommodate the whole extended family. When I found the cabin on Lake Dillon, I knew it was perfect. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a massive great room with a stone fireplace, and a deck that overlooked the lake. The price tag was $450,000, which was nearly every penny of my acquisition payout, but I didn't care. This was going to be my gift to the family, the thing that finally brought us together. I remember the day I called to tell them about the purchase. I was so excited I could barely contain myself as I described the property, the location, the potential for family gatherings. My parents seemed thrilled, immediately talking about how wonderful it would be to have a family cabin where everyone could vacation together. But even in that moment of apparent acceptance, the familiar patterns started emerging. Within an hour of my announcement, David had called to ask when he could bring his wife and kids for a long weekend. Emma was texting about using it for her anniversary celebration. My parents were making plans for hosting their friends from church. Everyone was excited about the cabin, but no one seemed to remember that I was the one who'd bought it. The first few months weren't terrible. I established some basic ground rules. People needed to coordinate with me before using the cabin. Everyone would chip in for utilities and maintenance, and we'd have designated family weekends where the whole clan would get together. It felt manageable, even hopeful, but slowly, incrementally, I started getting pushed out of my own property. David would book weekends without checking with me first, then act annoyed when I mentioned I'd already made plans to be there. Emma would invite her in-laws for extended stays, treating the cabin like her personal vacation rental. My parents started referring to it as the family cabin and acting like I was just the designated property manager. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago, right before my 28th birthday. I'd been planning for months to celebrate at the cabin. Nothing fancy, just a quiet weekend where maybe, for once, my family would focus on me and make me feel special. I'd mentioned it repeatedly in family conversations, had it marked on everyone's calendars, and even offered to cook a special dinner for everyone. 3 days before my birthday weekend, David called me with an announcement that would change everything. "Hey Sarah, I need to use the cabin this weekend. I'm planning to propose to Jennifer, and the lake setting would be perfect. You understand, right? This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "David, this is my birthday weekend. We've had this planned for 2 months. Come on, don't be selfish. You can celebrate your birthday any time. I can only propose once. Besides, Mom and Dad already said it would be fine. That last part hit me like a physical blow. My parents had given away my birthday weekend without even consulting me to celebrate my brother's engagement to a woman he'd been dating for 6 months. When I called my mother to discuss it, her response was even worse than David's. "Honey, you're 28 years old. Birthdays aren't that important anymore. David's proposal is a real milestone. Surely you can understand that his romantic gesture is more important than another birthday party." I understood, all right. I understood that even when I'd spent my life savings to buy something for the family, I still ranked last in their priorities. I understood that no matter what I achieved or how generous I tried to be, I would never be worth celebrating in their eyes. But I still wasn't ready for what happened next. That Friday afternoon, I drove up to the cabin anyway. I told myself I wasn't trying to sabotage David's proposal. I just wanted to prepare the space, maybe leave some champagne and flowers as a congratulatory gesture, and then slip away before they arrived. It would be my final attempt at being the thoughtful, accommodating daughter they seemed to want. I pulled into the gravel driveway at 4 p.m., grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk, and walked up to the front door. When I tried to insert my key, it wouldn't turn. Confused, I examined the lock more closely and realized it wasn't the same one I'd installed when I bought the property. Someone had changed the locks. Before I could process what this meant, I heard footsteps inside the cabin, and then my mother's voice from the other side of the door. "Who's there?" "Mom, it's me, Sarah. My key isn't working." There was a long pause, then the sound of the deadbolt sliding back. The door opened just enough for my mother's face to appear in the gap, and her expression was not welcoming. "What are you doing here?" The question was so absurd I almost laughed. "I'm here to check on the cabin and get it ready for David's proposal. But first, why did you change my locks?" My mother's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "We didn't change your locks, Sarah. We changed our locks. This is a family cabin, and the family decided we needed better security and privacy." The family decided? I'm family. No one asked me about changing the locks on my property. Your property? My mother's voice got that particular edge it always carried when she was about to say something cruel. This cabin belongs to the Martinez family. Yes, you wrote the check, but this is our vacation home now, and we've decided that people can't just show up whenever they feel like it anymore. I felt the world tilt sideways. "People can't just show up, Mum. I bought this cabin. My name is on the deed. I'm not people. I'm your daughter. And as our daughter, you should respect our need for privacy. David and Jennifer are arriving tonight for a very special weekend, and your presence would be inappropriate." The word inappropriate hit me like a slap. I was inappropriate at my own property, unwelcome at the cabin I'd sacrificed everything to buy for them. "So what exactly are you saying?" My mother straightened up, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold and final. "We need our privacy, Sarah. You can visit when you're invited. The family has discussed this, and we all agree that having open access isn't working anymore. We'll let you know when it's convenient for you to come up." She started to close the door, but I pressed my hand against it, my mind reeling. "Wait, are you telling me I'm banned from the cabin I bought?" "You're not banned. You're just regulated. This is better for everyone. Better for everyone except me. My mother sighed like I was being unreasonably difficult. Sarah, you're almost 30 years old. It's time you learned that not everything is about you. David's engagement is important to this family. Your birthday happens every year. Try to see the bigger picture. And with that, she closed the door firmly, leaving me standing on the porch of my own cabin, locked out and dismissed. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes trying to process what had just happened. My family had literally locked me out of the property I'd bought them, changed the locks without telling me, and told me I could only visit when invited on my birthday weekend for my brother's proposal to a woman they barely knew. As I walked back to my car, I saw Mrs. Henderson, the neighbour from across the lake, watching me from her deck. She raised her hand in a tentative wave, and I could see the confusion on her face. She probably thought I was some kind of intruder who'd been rightfully turned away. That drive back to Denver was the longest 2 hours of my life. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to understand how I'd gone from being the generous daughter who bought her family a vacation home to being an unwelcome visitor who needed permission to enter my own property. By the time I reached my apartment, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The desperate, people-pleasing part of me that had always sought their approval was quiet for the first time in my adult life. In its place was something harder, clearer, and infinitely more resolved. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, pulling up every document related to the cabin purchase. The deed, the mortgage papers, the insurance policies, the utility bills. Everything was in my name alone. I'd been so eager to make the cabin a gift to my family that I'd never actually put anyone else on the paperwork, which meant that legally, morally, and financially, the cabin was 100% mine. And if my family wanted to treat me like an outsider, then maybe it was time I started acting like one. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my real estate attorney, Jennifer Walsh, who'd handled the cabin purchase. I explained the situation and asked for clarity on my legal rights as the sole property owner. "Sarah," she said after I'd finished my story, "I need to be very clear about this. You have absolute authority over that property. If your family members are living there without your permission and have changed the locks to prevent your access, they are legally trespassing. You have every right to have them removed by law enforcement." The second call was to Sheriff Mike Jackson in Summit County, where the cabin was located. I explained that I was being denied access to my own property by family members who had changed the locks without permission. "Ma'am," he said in a gruff but kind voice, "family disputes over property are tricky, but the law is pretty clear. If your name is on the deed and you can prove ownership, we can absolutely assist you in regaining access to your property. Do you want to file a formal complaint?" The third call was to Pinnacle Properties, a high-end real estate agency that specialized in luxury vacation homes in the Colorado mountains. "I'd like to get a current market assessment on my cabin," I told the agent. "I'm considering putting it on the market." "Of course," she replied. "Based on the address you've given me and current market conditions, I'd estimate your property has appreciated to around $485,000 to $500,000. When would you like us to come take a look?" How about next Friday? And could you bring a for sale sign with you? I have a feeling I'm going to need it. By the time I hung up that third call, I had a plan. It wasn't a plan motivated by revenge or spite. It was a plan motivated by something much simpler and more profound. Self-respect. For 28 years, I'd been trying to earn a place in my family through sacrifice, achievement, and generosity. I'd given them my childhood, my energy, my money, and my dreams, and in return, they'd given me criticism, dismissal, and finally, actual exile from property I'd bought with my own money. I was done trying to earn what I should have received freely. I was done being the family scapegoat, the designated giver, the one whose needs always came last. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, then I would embrace being an outsider completely. And I would start by taking back what was mine. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystal clear mountain air that made the Colorado Rockies look like a postcard. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., not from nerves, but from a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Today was the day I would reclaim what was mine. I drove up to the cabin with Sheriff Jackson following behind me in his patrol car and Jennifer Walsh, my attorney, riding in my passenger seat. In my trunk was a for sale sign from Pinnacle Properties, along with all the legal documentation proving my ownership of the property. "You sure about this, Sarah?" Jennifer asked as we pulled into the driveway. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will be permanently altered." I looked at the cabin, my cabin, with its new security system that my parents had installed to keep me out, and felt nothing but clarity. "Jennifer, my relationship with my family was permanently altered the moment they decided I wasn't welcome in my own home. Today, I'm just making it official." Sheriff Jackson parked behind us and walked over, his hand resting casually on his radio. He was a tall, weathered man in his 50s who'd clearly dealt with plenty of family property disputes over the years. "Ma'am, I've reviewed all your documentation and everything appears to be in order. You are the sole legal owner of this property. If there are individuals inside who are preventing your access, we can resolve this matter quickly and legally." As we approached the front door, I could hear voices inside. My parents, David, and his girlfriend, Jennifer, were clearly in the middle of what sounded like wedding planning. They were discussing flower arrangements and photographer schedules, completely at ease in the home they'd stolen from me. I knocked firmly on the door. The voices inside went quiet. "Who is it?" my father's voice called out. "It's Sarah, Dad, and I have some people with me who need to speak with you." I heard urgent, whispered conversations, then footsteps approaching the door. When it opened, my father's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, annoyance, and then something approaching panic as he saw the sheriff standing behind me. "Sarah, what's going on? Why are there police here?" Sheriff Jackson stepped forward, his voice professional but firm. "Sir, I'm Sheriff Jackson with Summit County. We're here regarding a property access dispute." "Are you Robert Martinez?" "Yes, but I don't understand." "Mr. Martinez, this property is legally owned by Sarah Martinez. She's reported being denied access to her own home. We need to resolve this situation immediately." I watched my father's face go pale as the implications hit him. Behind him, I could see my mother appearing in the hallway, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "There must be some mistake," my mother said, pushing past my father to the door. "This is our family cabin. Sarah, what have you told them?" "I told them the truth, Mom, that I own this property and you've locked me out of it." "But Sarah," David's voice came from deeper in the house, "this is supposed to be a family property. You bought it for all of us." Sheriff Jackson held up his hand. "Folks, I'm going to need to see some identification from everyone, and then we're going to sort this out based on the legal facts. Sarah, do you have your documentation?" I handed him the folder Jennifer had prepared. Deed, mortgage papers, insurance documents, and utility bills, all clearly showing my name as the sole owner. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez," Sheriff Jackson continued, "do you have any legal documentation showing ownership or rental agreement for this property?" My parents looked at each other and I could see the realization dawning. They had nothing. No lease, no deed, no legal right to be there at all. "We don't need documentation," my mother said, her voice getting shrill. "She's our daughter. She bought this for the family." "Mum, family gifts of this magnitude typically involve legal transfer of ownership or formal agreements. Without documentation, you're essentially guests in someone else's home. And guests don't change locks without permission." That's when my brother David appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, looking confused and increasingly angry. "Sarah, what the hell is this? You're having us arrested over the cabin on my engagement weekend?" "Nobody's being arrested, David, unless you refuse to leave my property when asked." Jennifer Walsh stepped forward, introducing herself as my attorney. "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of this property ownership. Sarah purchased this cabin with her own funds, and all legal documents reflect her sole ownership. Any occupancy by family members has been by her permission only. Permission that has now been revoked," I added quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my family processing this information, watching their assumptions crumble in real time. My mother was the first to recover. "Sarah, you can't be serious. You can't just kick your family out because of a little disagreement about scheduling." "This isn't about scheduling, Mum. You changed the locks on my property without asking me. You told me I could only visit when invited. You treated me like a stranger at the home I bought with my life savings." "But we're family." Emma had appeared now too, holding her coffee mug like a shield. "Family doesn't treat each other this way." I felt something break open inside me, not in a bad way, but like a dam finally releasing pressure that had been building for decades. "You're absolutely right, Emma. Family doesn't treat each other this way. Family doesn't exclude the youngest daughter from every major celebration. Family doesn't miss their child's cancer treatment to attend a wedding. Family doesn't lock their daughter out of the home she bought them." Sheriff Jackson cleared his throat. "Folks, I need this situation resolved quickly. Sarah, what exactly are you asking for here?" I took a deep breath. "I want my family to gather their belongings and leave my property immediately. I'll give them until noon to pack up and clear out." "Sarah, no," my father said, his voice cracking. "Let's talk about this rationally. There has to be a solution here." "Dad, I've been trying to talk rationally with this family my entire life. I've been accommodating, flexible, and generous to the point of self-destruction. And in return, you've made it clear that I'm not really a member of this family. I'm just someone who pays for things. David stepped forward, and I could see him switching into his financial advisor mode. Look, Sarah, I understand you're upset, but you can't just kick us out without notice. We have plans, reservations, commitments. Plans that you made in my home without asking my permission. But the proposal, David, you can propose anywhere. You can't buy another sister who will put up with being treated like garbage for 30 years. That seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For the first time since I'd known him, my golden child brother looked genuinely shaken. Jennifer Walsh consulted her watch. It's currently 9:30 a.m. Sarah is giving you until noon. That's 2.5 hours, which is quite generous, given the circumstances. And then what? My mother demanded. You'll have us arrested? I walked back to my car and pulled the for sale sign from my trunk. The sight of it seemed to drain the colour from everyone's faces. Then I'm putting this property on the market and cutting ties with all of you permanently. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of wind through the pine trees. I watched my family, these people who had shaped my entire life, who I'd spent decades trying to please, stare at me like they were seeing me for the first time. My mother was the first to speak, and her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Sarah, you can't mean that. Selling the cabin, cutting ties? That's so extreme. Is it, Mum? Is it more extreme than telling your daughter she can't visit the home she bought without an invitation? Is it more extreme than missing your child's graduation to attend your son's second wedding? Is it more extreme than leaving a 16-year-old alone in the hospital during cancer treatment? Each example hit like a physical blow, and I could see my family members looking at each other with growing discomfort. Those were different circumstances, my father said weakly. No, Dad, those were choices, just like this is a choice. Sheriff Jackson stepped in again. Folks, I'm going to give you some privacy to work this out, but I need to be clear about the timeline. Sarah has the legal right to ask you to leave her property, and you have until noon to comply voluntarily. As the sheriff walked back to his patrol car to give us space, my family huddled together on the cabin's front porch, whispering urgently. I could catch fragments of their conversation, words like lawsuit, ungrateful, and family emergency. Finally, David broke away from the group and approached me. Sarah, listen. I know we've made some mistakes, but this is fixable. What if we work out a formal agreement, a schedule, maybe some rent payments? We can make this work for everyone. I looked at my brother, this man who had been the centre of our family's universe since the day he was born, and felt nothing but sadness. David, do you know what I wanted for my 28th birthday? What? I wanted our family to spend one weekend at the cabin where the focus was on me, where someone asked how I was doing, where someone cared about my life and my accomplishments and my dreams. I wanted to feel like I mattered to the people I love most. His face was flushing red. That's not... We do care about you. When was the last time you asked me about my work, about my dating life, about my plans for the future? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. When was the last time any of you celebrated something I accomplished without immediately making it about someone else? The the silence stretched between us. I graduated valedictorian, David. I built a successful career. I made enough money to buy a $500,000 vacation home for my family. And instead of being proud of me, you treated me like a walking ATM and then locked me out when I became inconvenient. Emma approached now, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, we didn't realise. We never thought. That's exactly the problem, Emma. You never thought about me at all. My mother joined them, and for a moment the four of us stood in a circle like we had during family photos when we were kids. Except now, instead of forced smiles, there were tears and desperate expressions. What do you want from us? My mother asked. Tell us what you want, and we'll do it. It was the first time in my life any of them had asked me what I wanted, and the irony wasn't lost on me. I want you to pack your things and leave my cabin. I want you to respect my decision to sell it. And I want you to think about whether you've ever treated me like a daughter and sister, or just like someone whose job was to make your lives easier. And if we do that, my father asked, if we leave and give you space, is there a chance we can rebuild this relationship? I looked at these people who had raised me, who I'd spent my entire life trying to win over, and felt something like peace settle over me. I don't know, Dad. For the first time in my life, I'm going to focus on what I want instead of what you want from me. Maybe that will lead somewhere good. Maybe it won't. David made one last desperate attempt. Sarah, please, the proposal was supposed to happen tonight. Jennifer has no idea any of this is going on. Can't we at least... David, you can propose to Jennifer anywhere. Rent a hotel room, find a restaurant, go back to Denver. You don't need my cabin to have a meaningful engagement. But the setting, the planning... You planned an engagement at someone else's property without asking permission. That's not romantic, it's presumptuous. I walked to the front porch and planted the for sale sign firmly in the flower bed my mother had cultivated over the summer months. I'm going to walk around the lake for an hour, I announced. When I come back, I expect to have access to my own home. As I headed down the path toward the water, I heard the frantic sounds of my family mobilizing, car doors slamming, urgent phone calls, the crash of hastily packed belongings. Part of me felt guilty for disrupting their lives so dramatically, but a larger part of me felt something I hadn't experienced in years, respect for myself. When I returned an hour later, the cabin was empty. They'd left the keys on the kitchen counter along with a note from my mother. Sarah, we hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. We love you. Mum. I crumpled up the note and threw it away. Over the next 3 weeks, my phone rang constantly. My parents called daily, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, always trying to find some angle that would make me change my mind. David sent long emails explaining how I was ruining his relationship and his life. Emma showed up at my Denver apartment twice, demanding that I stop this madness and think about the family. But I didn't answer the calls. I didn't respond to the emails. I didn't let Emma in. Instead, I focused on something I'd never been allowed to focus on before: myself. I met with a therapist who specialised in family trauma and learned terms like scapegoat and golden child syndrome that suddenly made my entire childhood make sense. I read books about setting boundaries with toxic family members. I started practicing yoga and meditation, and I finalised the sale of the cabin. Pinnacle Properties found a buyer within 2 weeks, a lovely retired couple from Texas who fell in love with the lake view and wanted a peaceful retreat for their golden years. The sale price was $485,000, which after closing costs and realtor fees left me with enough money to buy a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in downtown Denver with stunning mountain views. The day I got the keys to my new place, I sat on my private balcony with a glass of wine and felt something I'd never experienced before, complete peace with my own choices. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. I didn't need their acceptance or their love or their acknowledgement. I had given them 30 years of my life, and they had shown me clearly and repeatedly that I would never be enough for them. So I stopped trying to be enough for them and started trying to be enough for myself. My phone buzzed with another call from my mother. I looked at the screen, then turned the phone off and watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with exactly the people I chose to be with, which for now was just me. And that was more than enough. 3 months later, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. My new condo became a sanctuary where I could finally explore who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to meet someone else's expectations. I took up painting, learned to play guitar, and started dating a kind, thoughtful man who asked about my dreams and actually listened to the answers. I never did hear back from my family after they realised the cabin sale was final. Part of me wondered if they'd learned anything from the experience, but mostly I found I didn't care. I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. You can't buy love, acceptance, or belonging from people who have already decided you're not worth it. But you can choose to give those things to yourself. And sometimes that's the only choice that matters.